at, okay, so today we're looking at culture wars and Sunday laws. All right, this is going to be a semi-interactive presentation. If I ask a question, please feel free to answer. There is no wrong answer. We're all learning over here. So let's get into it. Okay, so we are going to begin with a review of the purpose of the Midnight Cry. So first question is, what is the purpose of the Midnight Cry message that came to us in 2018? Any takers?
I would say it was a call to prepare us for what's to come. So the cry is understanding the sin for this generation, I guess.
And what is it? What specifically is it preparing us for? What is coming? That was a good answer, by the way. Just, and you don't have to answer the subsequent question. Someone else can answer, or if you want to, you can continue as well. That's fine too.
The Sunday law.
Okay, yes. Thank you for that. Let me see if this thing will work. Yeah. So I have here to wake us up in preparation for the Sunday law. Anything else? It's waking us up, preparation for the Sunday law. Yes.
So it's helping us to remove any wrong ideas that we had before.
Yes.
And deconstruct and unlearn and relearn correctly.
Yes. So up until this time, we did not really understand. We had a different idea of what the nature of the Sunday law was going to be like. We thought it was going to be about Sabbath and Sunday. And the Midnight Cry message came to alert us, to wake us up, first of all, and to alert us of the danger of remaining with that previous understanding. And in that sense, if you're awake to the danger of that understanding, that means we need to learn what the actual understanding is supposed to be, right? Which is what we have been learning, and it's been defined and redefined, and not redefined, but like it's been refined. Yeah, so not redefined, but like it's been defined and refined, and now we are moving on with that understanding of the Sunday law. That's good. Thank you. Okay, so for the purposes of this review, we're going to look at the Sunday laws in the history of modern Israel. So we have there from 1798 to 1863 with the Sunday law in 1850, which was slavery. And then for the second Sunday law, I fail to remember the book and dates of that period. If anybody knows it, they can put it in the chat for us. But that Sunday law was in 1888, and it was about worship. And then the next Sunday law is what we are looking at, and we have understood so far that it's about gender equality and sexism. The solution to which is radical feminism. Speaking of sexism. Okay, so, all right. let's move on here. I'm having to. Okay, so now we're looking at, I gave you the answer. Okay, so I have the answer right there, so I don't have to ask the question. In that period from 1798 to 1863, we have slavery, and we have the key players being the North and the South. We have the abolitionists and those who were for slavery. We have the National Rifle Association, although they wouldn't really come on the scene later on with their gun laws. They were still active at that time. And there was a union of church and state in that people were using the Bible to justify making policies about the legality of having slaves, or the correctness of having slaves. And then we have internally, there were the Millerite leaders. I believe it was Miller and Ellen White, and then we have Samuel Snow. So those were the key players in during that dispensation, if I may use that word, from 1798 to 1863, with the Sunday law being at 1850 on the subject of slavery. Okay, I did the first one for you. Who's gonna take the second one? Anyone? Gotta tell me who the key players are in the 1888 Sunday law with the subject of worship.
Effie, sorry, just before we go there,
Yeah.
what did you say about the NRA? Sorry.
So the NRA was actually not organized at that time. They were, I put it there because guns were involved. The issue of, is it okay to shoot when your slave tries to escape, things like that. So gun laws were just starting to rear their its head, but the NRA itself was not organized until later, I believe. Don't quote me on that though. That's what I saw. And I thought that was interesting, actually, that their principles were active all the way back then, and then later on they got organized. So that's what I was saying with that.
So you're not referring at all about the National Reform Association, because you're talking about the NRA as the Rifle Association, but not the Reform Association. The association that was trying, to bring together church and state.
Yeah, we can put that as well.
Okay.
I think that is a good a key player for sure. That's a key player for sure. So National Reform Association. Okay. All right. I will put that in my notes. Thank you, Katia. Okay. Somebody to take the next one.
I honestly have no idea. Like I know that Senator Blair tried to enact this Sunday law. So would it be the state versus what? I don't know.
Okay, so let's help. Is someone able to help, or should I bring it and then we can look at it together? Okay, let me just bring it. Yep, you're right. So we have the Blair bill, and then we have the NRA. Katia brought that one up. And then again, there's the Union of Church and State. We saw that with A.T. Jones and Wagner going to court to talk about or to defend their rights to worship along with the other churches. So that is what happened in this period. Okay, and then the next period, gonna give a few seconds for any takers, and then we'll continue because I don't want this to be too long. Okay, okay. Okay, so the next one, we have the players being the King of the North, King of the South. We have right wing and left wing, Republican, Democrats, conservatives, and liberals. We have libertarianism coming to play. We have culture now, and state culture becoming quite prominent. We have new atheism. I meant to put atheism. And then we have newspaper prophets as well. So it is from this review that I pick culture from here, and that's where we're gonna zoom in today. So specifically, we'll be looking at culture wars and how it informs the Sunday law. And our goal is to juxtapose culture wars with radical feminism, because we want to solidify these two. We want to solidify the influential oppositional power that they have on each other as we approach the Sunday law. So we will do that by first looking at culture wars through a historical timeline lens. And then next we will discuss how culture wars has influenced public opinion in regards to patriarchal systems. And then finally, we'll consider culture wars and radical feminism. We'll try to bring them together and see and feel the tension between them. Okay, so next. Okay, so this is the historical timeline of culture wars, but we'll first start with where the term originated from. Does anybody know where or when cultural wars, sorry, came into play, or when it became popular? Does anyone have any idea? All right, so the term culture wars originated in the US, and it's often attributed to James Davison Hunter. He was a sociologist. I don't know if he's still alive. He popularized it in his book that he published in 1991 called Culture Wars: The Struggle to Define America. In that book, he analyzed the increasingly polarized public debates over issues like abortion and gay rights and education. He also argued that American society was being divided into two distinct ideological camps. So one is advocating for progressive changes based on secular and liberal values, which sounds more like the left. And the other is defending conservative, traditional, and often religious norms. So with that in mind, we also see that the concept of cultural conflict definitely has deeper historical roots, right? So throughout history, we can see that societies have witnessed tensions between moral, religious, and cultural viewpoints that are different. There's been wars over more different religious viewpoints. In history, there's been tension over moral viewpoints and then cultural viewpoints as well. So in modern times, especially in the late 20th century, the term culture wars actually comprised of a broad struggle between progressive and conservative ideologies, as I mentioned before. And we are focusing, I think it's global, but today we're focusing on America. We're focusing on how it has played out in American politics and media. So when we look at our timeline, we see that culture wars, the concept at least, came into play in the 1920s, with starting with prohibition and modernity, right? So,
what is modernity?
Modernity, it's talking about modern principles, like doing away with traditional stuff, and looking at things with new perspectives. And I will explain as we go on. I have explanations in here. I don't have it all in my head. There's a lot of information. So, but I was able to research it and get it on here. So I will tell you it. All right. Okay. So we're looking at the 1920s now, during a time when there were deep societal divides over moral and cultural values. So prohibition, enacted via the 18th Amendment. So prohibition happened when like through the 18th Amendment and the Volstead Act in 1920. And the prohibition now aimed to curb alcohol consumption. So it has to do with alcohol consumption, right? And however, it led to an underground economy of people now trying to consume alcohol, breaking the law and consuming alcohol underground, right? Like, so to speak. So bootleggers, right? And this definitely fueled organized crime. Okay. And meanwhile, the Scopes trial in 1925 pitted religious fundamentalists who believed in the literal interpretation of the Bible against modernists who were advocating the teaching of evolution in public schools. So here's that word, modernity. They wanted to look at something different from the Bible in this context, okay? So they were advocating the teaching of evolution in public schools. And the trial highlighted the tension between scientific progress and traditional religious beliefs, with the fundamentalist William Jennings Bryan famously arguing against the modernist attorney Clarence Darrow. Okay. So that was the 1920s. And then that's culture wars, in how culture wars looked like, the concept looked like in the 1920s. And then in the 1960s and 1970s, it played out in civil rights and social change. I think that one we're all mostly familiar with. The civil rights movement was led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., and it challenged the deep entrenched norms of racial segregation. And it culminated in landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. What I did not know is that simultaneously, the feminist movement, which was inspired by Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique, it was also demanding equal rights for women, like at the same time, including workspace equity, equality, and reproductive rights. So this is 1960s and 1970s. Protests against the Vietnam War also polarized the society, divided those who were for and those who were against, and it created a generational divide between the counterculture and traditionalists who viewed anti-war protests as unpatriotic. So that was how the culture wars looked like during that time. And then in the 1980s, we come to the moral majority and Reaganomics. And that is all about okay, let me look at it this way. So we all know who founded the moral majority. Jerry Falwell. He mobilized evangelical Christians around conservative social values and played a critical role in electing Ronald Reagan. Issues like abortion, with opposition to Roe v. Wade, school prayer, and resistance to the perceived normalization of homosexuality became focal points. Reaganomics, or supply side economics, also reflected a conservative approach to government, emphasizing tax cuts, reduced social spending, and deregulation, which critics argued worsened inequality. So I'm deducing from that they wanted less government involvement, right? Like the conservatives at that time, this is what they wanted, and that's how their culture was influencing societal change during the 1980s. Okay, are we okay so far? I know it's a lot of information, it's a lot of stuff. You can go look it up some more afterwards. Okay, so in the 1990s, the culture wars intensified. How did they intensify? They did because President Clinton's administration, there were a lot of heated battles over cultural values. There was the don't ask, don't tell policy that tried to find middle ground on military service by the LGBTQ. And it was criticized by both sides of the aisle. The Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA, prohibited federal recognition of same-sex marriages. Additionally, Clinton's welfare reform aimed to reduce government assistance, which conservatives supported, but liberals saw as an injury to vulnerable communities. The rise of conservative media outlets like Fox News and talk radio hosts like Rush Limbaugh provided a platform for conservative voices to further shape public discourse. So it looks like during this time, there was a lot of conservatism shaping public opinions in areas such as the LGBTQ, same-sex marriages, and government assistance, right? So that's how that played out in the 1990s. And then we come to the early 2000s, specifically 9/11 and its aftermath. And we can see that the September 11 attacks triggered significant shifts in the American society. And that led to the Patriot Act and the widespread surveillance practices that generated debates over civil liberties and national security. And the subsequent war on terror and wars in Afghanistan and Iraq polarized opinions as well. So all throughout, we're seeing a polarization, like something happens and then there's a divide. And then another thing happens and then the rift just becomes deeper and deeper. And with the two sides as we move along. And there was also, in this time period, of course, Islamophobia. Everybody was afraid of Muslims and all things Arab. And yeah, it was not good at all. And with the war on terror and with the Patriot Act came perceived erosions of individual freedoms as well. So a lot happening there. Now we move on to the 2010s, and on the scene, front and center, same-sex marriage and healthcare. So in 2015, the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. In which case? Do we remember what case that was? Which case allowed the not allowed, but Which case did the Supreme Court use to legalize same-sex marriage nationwide? You don't remember? And it's been a while since we talked about these things. It's Obergefell and Hodges. And this decision was celebrated by progressives, but definitely opposed by many conservatives who saw it as an attack on traditional values. How many of us at that time, when they announced that it's legal, it's federally legal to have same-sex marriages, how many of us at that time said, yay? I know I didn't at that time. I know I definitely lamented. I was like, oh no, now this thing is gonna spread. And anyway, so yeah, it's just interesting to look back and see how God has been leading. Yeah, so the affordable, pardon?
Effie, were you in the movement at that time or no?
Oh no, 2010? No, 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 no. I was living my best life somewhere else. Okay. Anyway, the Affordable Care Act, where was I in 2010? I was in Canada. Now that you asked, I want to go back and see. I was in Canada. I think I had just moved to Canada and I just got married, and I was, yeah,
But
I
if,
was a conservative Adventist. Yes.
wasn't that 2015?
Yeah, so the 2010s, the 2010s, yes, the thing happened in 2015. And in 2015, I was not in the movement either.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I was not in the movement. So from 2010 to 2019, those are the 2010s. Yes, yes. But this particular thing that we're talking about, yes, happened in 2015. I was still living my best life in 2015. Yeah. Anyway,
Those of us who were in the movement, though, Effie, there was a lot of talk on it and what that meant, and we obviously had the wrong
we
idea.
did.
So, yeah, I just
We did.
didn't know if you're aware of what was being taught at the time. I don't remember exactly.
Oh,
So,
are you talking about like in the movement?
yes, yes.
Oh, okay, okay. Can
Steph would
anybody
have.
share what was being talked about? Because I don't know.
Katia, were you in the movement at the time? Like I vaguely recall, like, but I know that there were talks of the end. I don't know. I don't remember. I'm not sure. But that's why I was wondering if you were there.
Yeah, but I was
Oh.
not in the movement either at that time.
Mhm.
I remember talks about it, from the church, but yeah, not from the movement.
That's interesting. Talks about the end, like the end, like close of probation type
Yeah.
of end.
Well, yeah, like it was a sign, and
Okay.
and I think at the same time, I'm pretty sure because there was a link. Tabo would know if he was here for sure. Because there was, I think even Tabo did a study. I don't know. But because what was going on internally
Uh-huh.
was the women's ordination, I think, at the same time. So
Oh
we
wow.
were looking at what was happening externally and internally, and we were
Mhm.
obviously saying that it was bad. Um,
Yeah.
because I think at that time, I think they did allow women. I don't know. I don't remember. It's all a blur.
Yeah, it is a blur, but you know what? Now that you bring it up, I can tell you what was happening in conservative Adventism in terms of talk of the end, because I remember there was talk about it's an assault on marriage, right? And then so now the next thing is going to be the Sabbath, and that's the Sunday law, right? So
I think that's you're right. I think it was the institution of marriage, and that must have been
yeah,
one of the
the
walls
twin
coming down.
institutions, right?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're
Mhm.
right. It's probably the same thing.
Yeah, it was definitely a buzz for sure. It's like, oh, anyway. Um, Are we okay to continue? Did anybody else want to comment? Are we good? I'll take that as we're good. Okay, so yes, Obergefell and Hodges happened, and then many conservatives saw it as an attack on traditional values, of course. The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, also divided the nation. This is in healthcare now, with proponents arguing it was essential for expanding healthcare access, while critics labeled it government overreach. Excuse me. Other contentious topics included immigration, with policies like the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which is the DACA program, and debates over sanctuary cities. Does anyone know anything about sanctuary cities? I did not have time to check that out. If not, that's okay. Just move on.
Never heard of that.
Pardon?
I think they were just
First I've
cities
heard of
that-
this right now.
Oh,
I think sanctuary cities are just cities where
who's talking? Jonathan, if that's you talking, we can hardly hear you. Sorry.
oh, sorry.
Oh, did he go away? He stopped talking. Okay, I'm not sure who that was.
It was Jonathan. He was just
Oh, okay. He's trying to come back. Let me admit him. Okay. Jonathan, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had to log on my phone.
Oh, okay. That's okay. That's okay. Go ahead.
Sanctuary cities, from what I remember, they were cities where I think there was a law, whatever the DACA thing, but it was it was places where people could go, immigrants could go to. I think primarily from South America, where these laws wouldn't be enforced, where they were protected from. I think actually no, I should look into it again. I forget, but it was
Oh,
something along those lines where people, they're like in the name sanctuary city, it was a place where they could go and be
mhm.
protected from these laws that were being enforced in some of the states, I think.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you for that. Okay. All
We're
right. So,
talking about this in the 2020s.
pardon?
Are you talking about this in the 2020s?
No, this is still 2010s.
Still
So
2010.
it falls under culture wars, and how it was playing out in the 2010s, where you had like same-sex marriage and healthcare, and then other topics like immigration was also front and center, because there were policies that were there were debate over policies such as the DACA program. And I think I remember that. I remember that. I don't remember exactly what year, but I remember, friends of ours being very anxious and scared that they might have to go back to a country that they know nothing about. They have lived all their lives in the US, and now there was a threat of being sent back to their heritage, the country of their heritage. Yes. So I remember that, but I forget what year that was. All right. So
It was like
Mhm.
2016, 2017. I think this was after Trump was elected. And
that would make sense.
what they had was this federal a part of the federal government that was like to do with border control, but it was called ICE, and it was like for immigration and customs. And what they were doing was they were going after people who came into the country illegally. It didn't matter, I think, how long ago it was,
Yeah.
and they were capturing them in cities and then deporting them back to their country of origin. And so the counties and states that were against this act were the sanctuary cities where these people could go and not be chased down by. It was like the Fugitive Slave Act. It was kind of the same thing.
Yes, right. Crazy stuff. Yeah, thanks for looking that up. Anyway, the 2020s now. let's see what happened here. So we've got racial justice and cancel culture. The Black Lives Matter movement, which was sparked by the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others, they pushed for accountability in policing and systemic reforms to address racial inequality. These events reignited debates around race, police reform, and historical monuments. The concept of cancel culture has further polarized public opinion, where cities argue it undermines free speech, while advocates claim it's a necessary tool for holding people accountable for offensive behavior. Social media has amplified these debates, often creating echo chambers that reinforce polarization. Tell me about cancel culture, somebody. What do you understand about cancel culture? Or have you heard it before?
From what I understand is, so for example, if you take the example of the Black Lives Matters, there were some opponents, that were trying to bring, their idea, but they were kind of canceling them, in the sense that they were not listening to them.
Like boycotting?
Yeah, like type of boycotting. So this is a little bit what it is. Cancel culture is when you don't like, what the other person is saying, you will not listen to that person at all. You will just
cancel them.
Cancel them.
You're canceled. Okay.
Yeah, that person is canceled, like. Yeah, but I'm sure, there's more to that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. I'm chuckling because I have other things going on in my head, but it's okay.
I have a question, Effie.
Yes.
Is cancel culture the same as counter-revolution?
That's a good question. If you're talking about the principle of it, I mean, off the top of my head, I would think so, but I'm not sure. What do you think?
I don't know. I've heard cancel culture, but is it smaller than counter-revolution?
Okay, this is like solely my opinion. I don't think it's smaller because of social media, right? Because that's where that's the tool that it's being used to spread the canceling of ideologies or people's behaviors that are not in line with what, some people believe, right? And
yes.
So,
cancel culture leads up to the counter-revolution.
Maybe. I don't know. Know. I wish I had a definite answer, but I don't. Yeah. Does anybody want to chime in?
I don't think it's the same. I don't think the two are the same.
What makes you say that?
Well, because cancel culture is just like, isn't it like targeting certain individuals or certain organizations, where a counter revolution is like the whole trying to counter what is going on everywhere.
Okay, let us just look it up so that we know. Just gonna define it. Okay, so the definition of counter-revolution is a revolution opposing a former one or reversing its results. So in order to have a counter revolution, you need to have a revolution. What is a revolution? A revolution is an uprising against existing principles. Okay, so something existed, there was a revolution, and then now a counter revolution will be the former existing ideology coming back to restore, right? So in this sense, if I'm thinking about it correctly, we are seeing more and more conservative ideas coming out, through policies and laws and all of that, right? That is countering a revolution that happened before. I don't know the details about that historical timeline, but I believe there was a system in place. The left came and disrupted and caused the revolution. And then now the right is countering that revolution to restore what was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
All right, then. We good? Wonderful. Okay. All right. So throughout the historical progression, we've seen how the culture worlds have persisted, and they have reflected underlying tensions over America's identity, in several topics. We have immigration, healthcare, we've got civil rights, general social change, we have racial justice, so many topics, right? But what we do know so far is that the message for our time, the issue for our time, is about gender equality, or inequality, gender inequality, because that's what's happening. And then the solution to that now is the radical feminism, which is a sweeping away of the existing system, because it has too many flaws and it can't be fixed. It needs to go. Okay, so so the tensions are over America's identity, moral values, and the extent to which government should play a role in shaping society. All right, so that took a lot longer than I thought it would. Okay. Okay, so we are at culture wars and public opinion about patriarchal systems. So under this heading, I came up with feminist movements versus traditional values, media representation and narratives, political polarization, policy implications, and intersectionality. And we're gonna start with feminist movements versus traditional values. So So feminist movements have historically challenged patriarchal norms, especially from the 1960s onwards, during the second wave feminism era. They have advocated for women's rights in the workplace, education, and reproductive health. And these movements push for policies like Title IX, prohibiting sex discrimination in education, and Roe v. Wade, which legalized abortion. Furthermore, the Me Too movement of the 2010s brought renewed attention to systemic issues like sexual harassment and assault, calling out powerful figures and exposing structural inequities. Traditional values groups like the Moral Majority, here they are again, from the 1980s, sorry. So those people, the Moral Majority from the 1980s, and more recent organizations like Focus on the Family, they opposed these movements. They opposed the feminist movements. And they argued that traditional gender roles preserve family structures and hence stabilize society. And they thought, so because of this, it led to support for policies like limitations on abortion and advocacy for women primarily fulfilling domestic roles. They wanted the women to stay home because that is what they thought would stabilize society. I don't know where they got that from, but anyway. So that is feminist movements and traditional values. We've got media representation and narratives. So the media has also shaped public opinion by portraying diverse narratives. Progressive media usually portrays strong female characters in non-traditional roles, such as CEOs, scientists, or single mothers, directly challenging patriarchal stereotypes. For instance, the TV series The Handmaid's Tale, I don't know about that one. It's just an example. I haven't watched it myself, but apparently it's based on Margaret Atwood's dystopian novel. So she has a novel and it illustrates the dangers of a patriarchal society. Has anyone read that novel? Any familiarity with what I'm talking about right now? The Handmaid's Tale. I haven't read it yet. No? Okay. If you're interested, hopefully you can get it and then can see what that's all about. But it illustrates the dangers of a patriarchal society, fostering discussions on reproductive rights and gender equality. On the other hand, we have conservative media, which continue to uplift traditional values, and commentators like Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, who are familiar names. They have framed feminist movements as radical, advocating a return to traditional family structures and portraying feminists as antagonists to those values. So again, we see the tension, pull here and there. Next is political polarization. Culture wars have also politicized issues around patriarchy, with gender roles becoming symbolic markers of broader ideologies. So gender roles, in a sense, is the tip of the iceberg. That's what it's trying to say. And there's many other issues underneath that are festering. Okay, so for instance, reproductive rights, including access to contraception and abortion, are key issues, as we have seen over the last couple of years till now. Progressive politicians often support access to these services, while conservative leaders oppose them, framing their stance as defending family values. They always come back to the family and how they need to preserve it and how they need to defend and how they need to keep the traditional roles. That is one of their core, if not the core, argument, because they believe that the family is the bedrock of society, right? So if that falls apart in their perspective, then what's gonna happen to society, right? It's all gonna burst into flames, and they don't want that. So the fight over Roe v. Wade, which culminated in its overturning in 2022 by the Supreme Court, exemplifies how divisive this issue remains. Similarly, debates over equal pay legislation, gender quotas in business, you know about that, and transgender rights are often split along political lines, with public opinion shaped by the political framing of these issues. Okay, so all through we're seeing the divide is getting deeper and deeper and deeper. So if like whether known or unbeknownst to us, we have been living our lives either on one side or the other. Like things are coming to us, issues are being presented to us, and we kind of have to, there's no middle ground. There are people who believe, they are in the middle, but it's radical feminism or nothing. It's all or nothing, because the system is really flawed. Yeah. So policy implications. Like we said before, these issues, these tensions over the different topics do influence policy. And we see that progressive policies such as the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009, referring to equal pay, gender equality in pay. It sought to address pay disparities by extending the statute of limitations on wage discrimination lawsuits. But then in contrast, states with conservative leadership have implemented policies restricting abortion access, yes, exemplified by the Texas SB 8 law that bans abortion after 6 weeks. Another polarization, okay? This polarization in policy reflects the differing public attitudes towards gender roles driven by contrasting ideological beliefs. So if we truly look at it with honest eyes, we really see that this Sunday law that we're heading to, it really could not have anything to do with the Sabbath and Sunday. And it has everything to do with culture, like which culture we subscribed to, which is what informs how we vote, how we live our lives. It informs everything, and it's so important to subscribe to the right culture. Yeah. And then we have intersectionality. This just talks about how the topics can crisscross with each other when you're looking at public opinion that has been shaped by culture wars. So for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, it crisscrosses with the feminist critiques of patriarchy by highlighting issues like police brutality against Black women and the marginalization of trans women of color. So you see those two things coming together. The feminist ideology with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So, but then they're talking about women at the end of the day, talking about women and trans women. On the other hand, some women from some communities, they align traditional structures with their cultural identity. So these are the ones who say, oh, we have our place, we are okay. We're not in bondage or anything. We choose to stay at home, for example, because they believe, especially in many religious groups and ethnic groups as well, gender roles are seen as integral to maintaining cultural traditions. Okay, here's that culture again. Culture, that it's so important for them that it is maintained, especially in light of gender roles. So public opinion within these communities often reflects this, with some women advocating for more representation within these roles rather than abandoning them altogether. So that's how the intersectionality concept applies when we are looking at culture wars and how it plays out alongside feminist ideologies. Are we good? We're okay? All right, so now that brings us to culture wars and radical feminism today. Okay, and under this heading, we're gonna review the core concepts of radical feminism. We will look at radical feminism in culture wars, how it looks like, what's going on there. And then we'll look at backlash and conservative opposition, and then the impact on public discourse. So some core concepts of radical feminism. I'm gonna read it out, but if you think of any other ones that I may have missed, please feel free to chime in. Okay, so radical feminism, as we know, it seeks to dismantle systemic patriarchal structures, and it advocates for a fundamental transformation of society. So not like, not a sweeping of the top. We're talking about groundbreaking transformation, right? Unlike liberal feminism, which often focuses on equality within existing systems, radical feminists argue that patriarchy is embedded in societal structures and that only a radical reorganization can address gender inequality. Their focus is on issues such as reproductive rights, the sexual objectification of women, and the devaluation of traditionally feminine labor. Okay, so that's what they are focusing on. So radical feminism in culture wars, like I said before, reproductive rights is a big issue, as we know. Radical feminists have long advocated for bodily autonomy and reproductive rights. Their efforts have led to contentious cultural battles as they oppose restrictive abortion laws and advocate for comprehensive sex education. The push for abortion rights, in particular, has become a central issue in the culture wars, with opponents arguing that radical feminism undermines traditional family roles. There it is again. And then you have sexual liberation and objectification. Radical feminists argue against the objectification of women by challenging beauty standards and challenging pornography, and saying that women have the right to define their sexuality independent of patriarchy. Patriarchal norms. And this stance sometimes puts them at odds with other feminists and cultural movements that promote sex work decriminalization, for instance, leading to internal debates and external criticism. So radical feminism is caught in the middle, so to speak, because radical feminism is not like the other feminist movements. So internally, under the feminism umbrella, radical feminism gets attacked. Okay, and then externally, radical feminism gets attacked because of conservatism. So it's receiving it from all sides, and that's what we are up against. Then we have backlash and conservative opposition. So conservative groups often frame radical feminist movements as a threat to traditional family values, yes. And the notion of dismantling patriarchal family structure is seen as destabilizing, destabilizing societal norms. Yes, and because of that, that makes everybody nervous, right? If you're thinking of society being destabilized, it is concerning if that's how you perceive radical feminism to be. And with that concern and anxiety, it moves and galvanizes the conservative groups to create all these programs and policies that stop this from happening, because in their minds, if this happens, it's the end of the world. So yes, like I said, it has led to organized opposition through religious and political channels, seeking to protect what they perceive as the natural order of gender roles. And then there's also the political mobilization, which we've talked about previously in terms of the abortion laws and the moral majority. All right, and last but not the least, impacts on public discourse. So all of this now that we're in the information age, a lot of people are talking. We cannot help but talk because there's social media, and that's just what we do. So then what happens as a result of that? There's a deeper polarization and profound misunderstanding. And that happens because the intense debates that happen and the different conversations that occur or that happen, they make radical feminists, someone who doesn't understand what radical feminism is all about will often lump it up with all the other feminist movements, right? And this leads to a widespread misconception about the feminist movement as a whole. Okay, and then I mentioned social media, the social media amplification. Social media has magnified these conflicts where individuals can find communities reinforcing their existing beliefs, again, polarizing, okay, leading to echo chambers and further polarization. Yep, memes, commentary, and viral hashtags create caricatures of opposing viewpoints and often oversimplify very complex issues, and it makes compromise difficult. So yeah, yep, it makes it difficult for you to be on one side, and then maybe let's say you realize, oh, this is actually wrong, this is the wrong understanding of it, I want to shift. Well, if you do that on social media, it's gonna eat you up. So then it makes people stay where they are, so that's the effect of social media amplification of this issue. So we can see that radical feminism, it continues to influence the culture wars by challenging traditional structures of power and control, even as it faces significant opposition from conservative factions, groups determined to preserve conventional values. The result, again, is an increasingly polarized public landscape where these differing ideologies continue to clash over the future of gender roles in society as we approach the Sunday law. Okay, so in summary, I want to summarize before I end. In summary, we first reviewed the purpose of the Midnight Cry message and agreed that it is to wake us up, to first wake us up, which tells us that we were sleeping, and to also alert us to the correct understanding of the nature of the Sunday law and to the reality that the Sunday law is very near. Okay, it also alerts us to better understand the specific issues involved and the key players. And then we looked at the three Sunday laws in modern Israel's history on a line, and we saw that the Sunday law is all about gender, because now we had slavery, we had worship, and now we are at gender. Okay, we then turned our attention to culture wars and traced it through history to the present. We also explored the influence of culture wars and its influence on public opinion about patriarchal systems, and we juxtaposed it with gender equality and radical feminism. And this now solidifies our current knowledge that the Sunday law is about gender inequality rooted in culture, with radical feminism as the only cure. Okay, so I know I have said a lot. Most of it, I want to say you already know, but it's a review. I believe it's a good review for us, and for those of us who found things that we don't know, we can always go back and look it up. So before I close, I want to encourage us with this quote, and it's from Christian Experience and Teachings, page 57.2, and a bit of point 3. It says, I seemed to be surrounded with light, to be rising higher and higher from the earth. I turned to look for the Advent people in the world, but could not find them. When a voice said to me, "Look again and look a little higher." At this, I raised my eyes and I saw a straight and narrow path cast up high above the world. On this path, the Advent people were traveling to the city, which was at the farther end of the path. They had a bright light set up behind them at the beginning of the path, which an angel told me was the midnight cry. This light shone all along the path and gave light for their feet, so that they might not stumble. If they kept their eyes fixed on Jesus, who was just before them, leading them to the city, they were safe. Let's pray. Thank you, dear God, for your guidance. Thank you for the light behind us and how it shines all the way till we see you face to face in peace. Thank you, O God, that you are enabling us to understand all these, begin to understand all these different issues and complex topics. We may not fully understand them yet, but Lord, you see our efforts, and we believe that you are blessing our efforts and empowering us to do even more and to understand even more. Our prayer, oh Lord, is that you help our feet to be firm on the platform that you've set for us, on the foundation that you've set for us, so that we will remain standing though the heavens fall. Thank you, God, for everybody who made it to the presentation. I pray that you will bless them and that you continue to guide them in their lives, Lord. Thank you for hearing our prayers in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Thank you so much for that.